This kind of disease is a perfect storm.
It is a fungal disease that is caused by a novel pathogen called Geomyces destructans.
It's a fungus that's pretty invasive.
And what this fungus does that's very unique is it actually
invades hair follicles and glands and starts to erode away the outer layer of tissue,
sending hyphae or roots right in through that by the hair follicle of the skin.
White nose syndrome first appeared in North America in the winter of 2006.
The proximal causes of death aren't very well understood.
Since then, it has killed, we think, around 5 million individuals.
It spread pretty rapidly.
Now more than 20 states in the eastern U.S. have confirmed cases.
Now it's just pretty much a matter of time before areas become saturated.
So white nose syndrome is caused by the pathogen Geomyces destructans, and Geomyces destructans is a cold-loving fungus.
It was first seen as a bunch of white fungal growth on the nose of a small cluster of bats, and it was more of a curiosity at that point.
It really wasn't observed by bat biologists until 2007 when Al Hicks, the bat biologist for the state of New York, actually sent around a photograph of a cluster of little brown bats with each of the animals having a white fungus, a white powder substance around its nose.
So the estimates thus far are that over 6 million bats have been killed by white nose syndrome. One of the challenges is that we don't actually have great information on bat population sizes prior to white nose syndrome impacts.
It's been very disappointing to do counts at many of these colonies that sometimes had 1,000 or more bats. Now, at best, we're finding 100 or 200 animals returning to those sites.
The question that always comes up is, what does this mean? Is this devastation of our ecological systems?
Other species within the cave ecosystem rely on bat guano, and many of these species, that particular cave that they're found in is the only place in the world that they're found in. And so if you take out the bats, there's no more guano. We could subsequently see the extinction of some other species.
The real impacts of that are unknown. These bat species feed exclusively on flying insects. A lot of those flying insects do damage to agricultural crops and other plants, so the potential could be quite severe. We really just don't know at this point.
So in 2006, I think, there were cavers in Howe's Cavern near Albany, and they noticed
a bunch of white fungal growth on the nose of a small cluster of bats.
They took a picture of this little cluster.
In subsequent years, there suddenly were these huge die-offs of little brown bats.
And then these cavers came forward with their photograph from the year before, so we knew it's been present as early as 2006.
This site is actually the single site where we have the oldest evidence of the disease in North America, dating back to 2006. It is one of the original white nose infected sites from as early as we can trace the disease in North America. And so if we're looking at it to get a glimpse into what the future might hold for elsewhere, where the disease hasn't been in effect as long. We're going to be handling some bats today, but the idea is to so the number of bats in this cave and some of the other caves around here seems to be relatively stable now after the initial decline. And there are people who doubt that it's the same bats coming back year after year. They might be congregating in these places from other sites nearby, and that this apparent stabilization of the numbers might be misleading. So the first thing we want to do is look for pre-existing bands from our trip last year where we banded every bat we could get our hands on in here.
Yeah, a little bit. The UV seems to be pretty diagnostic.
This cave is dominated by the little brown bat, which used to be the most common bat in the state of New York, although it is no longer. It also has a number of other species too. Big brown bats, small-footed bats, tricolored bats. We saw all of those today. It's pretty clear that this fungus was introduced to someplace in this general area in upstate New York relatively recently. We also marked each individual bat so that we can identify them in the future and tell if they return as survivors in future years. This site used to have over 1,000 bats regularly each year, most of which were little brown bats. Today we saw probably about 50 or 60. It's pretty clear actually that the initial decline, the first two or 3 years after the disease hits the site, is precipitous. At which point, you know, most of the bats die during that time period, and then there's a marked decrease in the rate of decline, and some sites even show some evidence of stabilization.
Bats will feed heavily in the fall, try to accumulate their fat reserve, go to the cave roofs often after a couple of killing frosts when insects are no longer available, and then spend winter, say October to maybe April, in their cave roofs.
One unique thing about bats is that they go into torpor during hibernation, and they'll have these long bouts of torpor where they drop their metabolic rate and their body temperature lowers to near ambient temperature, so near the temperature of the cave, which is within this ideal growth range, this maximal growth range of Geomyces destructans.
In order to survive the winter and save its fat reserves, bats literally reduce their immune system. It gets depressed during the wintertime because they don't want to use up that energy.
So when you turn down the immune system, a fungus that grows very slowly is very capable of attacking you and doing a very successful job of it.
It causes them to arouse more often than normal and for longer periods of time than normal during the winter, which has the undesirable impact that it causes the bats to deplete their stored fat reserves too quickly.
So this repeated arousal from hibernation, more often than they should be, burns through all their fat, and they subsequently die about February, March.
Well, it's a fascinating story. We received a phone call from Al Hicks. I can tell you it was on a Sunday evening when he said, "Scott, this is the phone call you wish you never got." And he told me about this photograph of an infected bat in the state of Vermont.
So the first time I saw the effects of white nose syndrome was within the first 2 or 3 months that I was a graduate student at Boston University.
So we started evaluating the impacts of the disease on our smaller sites with literally 100 or 200 bats in there.
You came here in 2009 and we were going up to Aeolus Cave in Vermont.
There's hundreds of thousands of bats there. And in 2009 we walked into that cave.
And so we get up to the cave. We have to snowshoe through about 3 feet of snow for about 2 miles or so.
And found bats literally flying out of the cave entrances.
Then you see bats on the ground, either dead or about to die, kind of
just struggling on the snow.
On the verge of death. So there are bats everywhere outside of the cave. And then we suit up in our Tyvek suits.
And the floor of the first hall that you walk into in that cave,
there were 10,000 dead bats on the floor. It's certainly a humbling experience to see your study organism being wiped out in front of your eyes and really feeling like you have no ability to do anything about it.
It really, not only was it not very pleasant, but it just struck you of what a terrible way for these poor animals to die. And bats I've always described as simply a fascinating animal. And we know who's been hibernating successfully in Aeola's cave for 10,000 years. And there you are, while it's on your watch for conserving bats, they're all dying in front of your very eyes. And that is hard to swallow.
I'm showing you Winston. His ears were just about gone. The light part is what was gone and has regrown. You could definitely see the difference in the texture. And a lot of this he chewed off, that's why he has no finger bones left. He was out there in January on the ground for God knows how long. And the pain of dehydration and, you know, everything rotting. Actually, it was a young guy. He was like a limo driver, and he brought him, this is fun, with his girlfriend. And he had put him in like a McDonald's bag. So when I get there, I meet the guy, he opens up the door, he gives me the bag, I look in it, there's no bat in the bag. She's like, oh my gosh, she was freaking out in the car. He was on the side of the door. Yeah, he was the first one that survived, and from that point on, they all lived. These are Corollias. They're from Brazil, down South America. I have, all right, well, I have these, and then I just have 8. Right now I have 8 species from New Jersey. There's 9 species. I don't have a small-footed. Pretty soon I'll be getting rid of the hoary, so I won't have her. I have 2 silvers that are in captivity, so I'll always have them. I have the reds that are in captivity. And everybody else, the long ears, the Indianas are in captivity, the little browns. The big browns will go, but I do have 9 big browns that I keep for education. Okay. Hey, come here, let's see your wings. All right, see, now that's, can you see, all that light was gone. So a lot of them run around, they flutter around, but they can't fly. And it's like, you know what? They can live their life out here. Now look at that. I can't even open that. And part of that at the bottom was probably from dehydration and frostbite, and you know, they were on the ground in 10-degree wet. That was a brutal winter. 2000, it was 10 degrees every night. It was horrible. Think about these poor little things that haven't eaten in months, and they're flying out and they're on the ground, freezing to death. How awful. So, look at them. Look at you guys. Hi. I know. Why do I do? Because it matters to them. Because the ones I set free, it does matter to them. How can you not save something if you know you can? You know, how can you not? I think the worst was when he brought me that 131. We had no, I don't think he even had an idea. They came in 2 groups. They came at 101 and then 30. But it was like once I got the 101, first I had a sub-Q. I had to give an injection to every one of them to get fluid into them. You know, like you're on number 40. You got 61 to go. It's like, all right, now you're on number 70. You got 31. But how could you not when I knew I could save them? You know, so.
What most people don't understand is bats are not flying mice, that they actually live to be very long, 20 to 30 years for these little brown bats, and they produce 1 pup per year, which is an extremely low reproductive rate.
Populations will not recover rapidly, even if there's immunity or disease resistance built up in the population. Bats have a very low reproductive rates, and typically a single young per year, and so those females that are successful in breeding will slowly rebuild the population. So we're looking at very long-term effects.
Yeah. Something else just to think about is the generation of children that will go out in the summer and look up in the sky and not have the ability to see a bat flying around. And
I can tell you that people like at my age who can easily remember the nighttime sky being full of bats, or being fishing on a lake and pond and seeing bats flying up and down. Those are memories that the next generation will never ever see.